Okay, in front of us we have our little name tags here, if anybody wants to know who we are. I would like to start, and I'm going to call this hearing to order. This is hearing number NB 1500002.
No, 5.
It's got to be 5 now?
It is 5, not 2.
Whatever.
It was the last one.
5. Green Mountain Live LLC, Pownal, Vermont. Let me go through with you briefly the rules of procedure that we will use here, if I could. Make sure that everyone who is sitting in the audience has signed in. I think there was a sheet that went around. If you didn't, please make sure that you do, so that Julie knows who you are. Any evidence that needs to be entered, and I noticed some of you, we've had a whole stack of material. I assume that's been passed down, so Julie has a copy of everything that you're going to be presenting tonight. Okay, very good. Anybody who intends to speak before this hearing needs to be sworn in. So even if you aren't sure that you're going to speak, please get sworn in, because I'm not going to remember who got sworn in, who didn't get sworn in, and I'm going to get punched on one side or the other by one of my members here. It's going to say, hey, they never got sworn in, and we'd have to stop and do that. So if you will raise your right hand and repeat after me, do you swear the testimony that you will give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Very good. This is a hearing to take testimony.
If you're going to speak, you need to be sworn in.
This is a hearing to take testimony before this board. You will be speaking to us. We will take all the testimony that you wish to give us. And then we're going to go into deliberative session, which means we're going to sit here and you're going to go home. And we're going to deliberate for a while. We may not do it tonight, but eventually we will reach a decision which you will receive in writing from this board. You only have 45 days to do that in. So if you wish to speak before this board, you're going to be speaking to us, and you're going to not be speaking around the room here, and this is not going to be a debating society. Okay, you know, you state your piece, and that's fine, and if the guy next to you doesn't agree, well, he doesn't agree, but we're not going to have a debate over who's right and who's wrong. This is strictly testimony for us tonight. Okay, we're going to keep this meeting civil, and we're going to start now with, I have to ask if any member of this group feels that he, she has a conflict of interest with the information, with what's going to happen tonight. I would request that they recuse themselves and sit in the audience or whatever they need to do. If not, we're going to proceed along the lines of the fact that this is a village zone where this is taking place. This is a proposed temporary outdoor theater stage, which means this is a conditional use. That's what this permit will be tonight. So I'm going to ask that somebody here, among you folks that are here with this group, or a bunch of you, tell us a little bit about this project. There's a series of things that I have to go through and ask you about, and you have to respond to. And I want to try to do that in an orderly fashion, otherwise we're going to bounce all over the place, and some of the stuff's not going to get done.
So, I just thought I could start that process.
Okay,
for
I
you.
have some more people. This is going to go on forever, I can see it. You folks that came in, any of you planning on giving testimony, I need to swear you in, if I can, right now. Okay. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Anybody else? If you didn't get sworn in, then you won't be able to speak. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the meeting and for the very concise introduction in terms of how the board works and what's going to happen. My name is Robin Stern. I'm an attorney from Brattleboro, Potter Stewart Law Offices, and I'm basically here to introduce some of the folks that really know the project and are available for your questions. There are obviously check the boxes that have to be met in any conditional use permit. Those have been supplied. Mr. Lamb, I'm going to let Steve, give the overview of the project. The other guys are here for support. But you may also, wish to go through each of the components of the zoning reg. However we do it is fine. I think the overview is obviously helpful, although probably a lot of you are somewhat familiar with the project right now. I think it's what's important to note, this application is for this one event, which is interesting, but it really is an opportunity to see what can happen at the site with this group of folks, with this team. And there's a lot of opportunity. You folks have been here for a while and you've seen a lot of things come and go. I think the idea of having an event and seeing how that event goes provides wonderful possibilities for what needs to be fine-tuned, what works, what doesn't work. So we're here for the one event, but hopefully there can be more events in the future. So on my far left is Scott Weicker, and Scott is an events, he has an event management company and does lots of events, including events similar to this. These are very brief introductions, but again, they are available for questions and to expand as we go on. To Scott's right is Bobby DeLuca, who's a production coordinator for events such as this. To Bobby's right is George Bacall, Jerry Bacall, sorry, a concert coordinator. And then we have Stephen Soler, who you all have been working with or have met over or at least some of you, over the last several months, and is putting this project together. So I would have Steve as team leader here start the explanation.
Sure. What I'd like to do, if I can, is bring up one of the boards to walk you through what the proposed use of the site is. What I've done is I've got two boards. One of them I would like the public to see, because typically you guys never get to see things that get presented. And put this here so that you can see what the site is. This is essentially the entire site. This is the site plan. What we've done with this site plan is provided you what the production area will look like and what the event area will look like for this particular event, which is going to be a music event. We're anticipating no more than 15,000 people, most likely 10 to 12,000 people. And as a result of this production area, we ended up creating, if we flip to the next page, a parking plan. And that parking plan provides sufficient parking capacity for this event. That parking plan has been reviewed by the state police, by the Bennington County Sheriff's Office. We've hired a firm, Clark Harbor and Associates. A report on the parking has been provided to you to discuss how that parking plan not only works, but how that gets absorbed through the roads. And what they've done is evaluated the roads, coordinated efforts with both Vermont Transportation as well as Mass DOT on what the circulation will look like and what the absorption of traffic would be on Route 7. And in that plan, you'll see that the road can accommodate up to 3,000 cars an hour and this actually contemplates 2,000 cars an hour coming in. So this really gives you the all-inclusive plan for how the site would be populated. The idea would be to open the doors at 10 o'clock in the morning. That would be when the first cars would show up. And we would have music starting at 12 noon. And that music would be going on over the course of the day. I'm going to call it intermittently until, as we're requesting, 11:30 at night. That would be when the music would stop. And we believe that the population that will come here will probably start to dissipate more towards 10:30, 11 o'clock, depending upon whether or not people want to see that last band that we have play or not play. But we expect the vast majority of the population that will be here to occupy the site between 3 o'clock in the afternoon and maybe 10 o'clock at night. What we've also done is blown up some of those areas to give you a more granular look at the production compound, how it is fenced off, what we have for trailers for different artists and for operations, as well as the tent that would be a catering tent and to service the performers that are here. This shows fencing and an access road. It shows 2 stages, which in your application, they're listed as stage line SL 320s. They will not exceed the 45-foot height restriction that you have in the town of Pownal, and that these 2 stages will act intermittently, where a band would perform here, then a band would perform there. They're almost acting like one stage. Those stages actually come in on trucks. So the truck literally backs up, and it's almost like a transformer. The sides of the truck pop out, and the hydraulic lift pops the stage up. So there's no stage that gets erected, it's really sitting on a truck. The same would be true with the front of house, and another stage that's in another area, where it's going to come in on a tractor trailer, and it just transforms into the front of house, which is the production area that Puppy DeLuca will talk about with respect to these particular stages. We've also looked at all of the setback requirements that you have so that we're not near any roads, near any water. The setbacks have been carefully reviewed to make sure they're within your setback requirements. And we've also looked at public safety, where EMT stations would be, where fire and police would be able to monitor and maintain the site, and Pownal Fire, Pownal EMS, as well as, again, the Bennington County Sheriff's Office and the State of Vermont Police have all reviewed this and have all agreed with what the plan is. And then last, what we've done is provided you a sort of blow-up of how people come in. They're going to park in the parking area, walk their way through into this ticket entrance area. Some people might buy tickets at the box office. And as they walk in, there'll be a smaller stage that will start with bands at 12 noon. That stage will most likely shut down at 8 o'clock at night, so that these 2 stages will be the only stages operating from 8 until 11:30. And this gives you sort of this open area. We've got 2 beer gardens that we are working with the Department of Liquor Control on how we're going to have these set up so that we have the appropriate measures in place. Only the people that are of age have the ability to buy beer. And I think that they asked us to stop selling beer at 10:30. 10:30. So we will stop selling beer at 10:30 at night. We'll have food vendors and merchandise vendors that'll be in here. And to the extent possible, we've reached out to people in the local community to service all of this. We've got local Vermont beer vendors that are actually going to be here. We're talking to Vermont food vendors to come in. And in the application, you'll also see we've reached out to a Shaftesbury-based and a North Adams-based Porta-John vendor, because we want to, again, utilize local resources. In fact, Shaftesbury only has so many, he's got 50, so we need to have 50 One sheet that I don't have up here is a photometrics plan, which I can give to you. We got that a little bit later this afternoon, and that was primarily because our goal is to populate the site with solar light towers. And the challenge with solar light towers is that we actually have to get them from North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. Sort of defeats the purpose behind being green if we're going to place all this stuff up here. But they were going through the process of looking at what that photometric plan would call for. And in order for us to use those solar light towers, which meet the requirements of the illuminating engineers, so that we have a dark sky initiative adopted within the site, we'd have to have 70 of them, because the lumens, which I think is on a handout that I gave to you, really only populate 25 square feet. And that they're about, I think, 1 to 2 foot candles at the perimeter of that 25 square footprint. So in order for us to meet some of the requirements that we'd like to meet, being sustainable, but utilizing renewable energy resources as much as we possibly can, it's going to require that we have a lot more on the site. As we look at some of the questions that were raised in your application, what I've done is I've provided you with a letter I sent to Julie, which touches on what I believe are virtually all of the issues that should come up.
We need to go through those one at a time.
And I'd like to do that with you, because then I can point to the answers to any of those particular questions.
Believe me, that's perfect, great.
It's in your packet, and it's good to go through on each.
Thank you.
Okay, hopefully that's a
No, that's.
high-level overview.
I'd like to start, this is going to be a continual use. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas that we need to touch on here. And I think you've touched on them, but we have to go through, make sure they've been touched on. And we have to, as a group, then say they've been met or they haven't been met. Okay? First one is the capacity of existing or planned community facilities. I assume that takes, you've already talked about the fire rescue, and the facility down there can handle all the events and the crowd that you're talking about. That
Yes.
that can, okay. The character of the area affected, is this going to adversely affect that area down there? Anything that you could add to that? Do you think it will, you think it won't, you think it's going to be okay?
In your packet, I have a narrative that's noted the economic, social, community impact of the Green Mountain Racetrack of the town of Pownal, Bennington County, and the region in general. And I think that touches on the impact. Hopefully that addresses that issue for you.
Traffic, we've talked about traffic.
Yes.
You've talked about traffic. Any other bylaw or ordinance or regulation of the town that this will impact on that you have discovered or?
Not to our knowledge. We looked through the bylaws to make sure that every
Okay.
requirement was met or
And
addressed.
utilization of renewable energy resources, and I think you've talked about trying to do that.
Well, with the solar light panels, there's one thing, we're going to use biodiesel for generators that will be backup power. In fact, they'll be the primary power for the stages. And we're in discussions with Green Mountain Power about buying power from the abutting solar panel farm and have all that power be used for the event for the day.
Okay, very good.
If you get that, will you then not use the diesel generators?
The way that it works is that solar panel farm is actually owned by a Spanish solar panel company, and they have a contract with Green Mountain Power.
Yes.
So what happens is the power goes through inverters and goes up to the grid and goes into the grid. So all I'm doing is really buying an allocation of power from them, but we still would have the diesel generators because you need to have redundancy with events like this. And if the grid goes down, everything goes dark.
Yeah.
So
Which you
we
don't wanna have.
can't have that happening. So we'll have and the biodiesels are quiet diesels. They're called whisper generators, so you probably won't even hear them running.
Okay. The board have any other questions for the gentleman on this particular issue?
I did have a question. You mentioned a fence going around the performance area and
Yes.
so on. Is that fence already there, or is that something you'll put up?
Some of the area is already fenced. What we'll probably do is put a security fence, which will be a temporary fence around the area because we have to protect the performance, the artists. And we've got some really big name artists that are gonna be there. And we'll probably bring in 8-foot panels in order to prevent people from jumping in them.
The little house called FOH, front of house, is that where all the lighting work is done, or what is the purpose of that little house?
Well, I'll let Bobby talk about that, but
That's more of the control area for all the engineers that are mixing the show. The lighting is run from that area too as well. And if the artists do follow spots, front of house spots, like you go into a theater, you see the guy working in the back of the house, that's really the front control area
Okay,
for the
and
entire, for the event.
That means that there's cables
Correct.
running to that house
Yes.
and back and so
Yes.
on. Okay.
Does anybody else on the board have a question?
One more question, new to this kind of thing. In your diagram, it showed the 2 units sitting here. And is the viewing area on the same side as the beer gardens?
Sure.
Is that where most of the people will be?
yeah, let me show you that plan a little bit more detail so you can see. So here's where your stage is, looking this way, and the beer gardens are behind the mixing area. So they're
Okay,
pretty far back here.
okay. Now, is that area large enough to hold 12,000 people?
So to put this in perspective, that was a 1 mile track. So if
Okay,
I go all the way around, so from here to here is about a quarter mile.
okay,
And actually, one of the issues that we're concerned with is it's gonna look empty, even with 12,000 people. Lollapalooza had 36,000 people, and this is where they were.
okay,
We're projecting about a third of the size of Lollapalooza,
okay,
so it's gonna be pretty big.
okay. All right, thank you.
Anybody have any questions on this end?
Yeah, Frank.
Jerry. Gary?
I think this is great, you addressed everything. All of them say you're planning with the local authorities. Is that plan gonna be submitted ahead of time, written, you gonna have written plans that will have it?
The only plan that still needs to be vetted is with the state, with VT Trans. And that's really gonna be a traffic management plan on the road. And what it really talks about is where we put signage and where we put cones. So they wanna know how many cones, how tall the cones are, where do they go, because that's a state requirement in order to have access on the road. But pretty much the safety plan has been put in place and has been discussed with everybody. All the other plans have been completed, and as a result, you have letters from fire, rescue, as well as Bennington
Well, that's what I'm
County
asking is, it says you're gonna make a plan. Is there a written?
Sheriff.
Jerry, if I can answer that. We have submitted to the Vermont State Police a safety, security, and evacuation plan for the property. There will be meetings with Vermont State Police, Bennington Sheriff's Department, the Bennington Police Chief, the Williamstown Police Chief, and all emergency service organizations to refine that plan. But there'll be a number of meetings so that everyone is on the same page, and it will be a written plan. And I think we'd be happy to submit that to the DRB when it's all said and done.
The other question was and I didn't think about it till you said about how the flow of people. Is there a difference in how you think about the people who are actually inside the gate versus being in the parking lot? Is that?
Part of what Clough Harbor did, which is the traffic management and parking analysis, was to look at how do people get in and how do they process their way into the property. And based on this plan, and we've had multiple refinements to the plan from what it originally was to where it is today, they feel that the circulation plan, which I think is what you're getting to, works for this particular event.
Well, a couple thoughts, and in a lot of public activities, whether it's a school building or a football game, things are different inside than they are. And are you gonna treat that differently? In other words, a lot of times they say, well, that's out in the parking lot, and that didn't.
Oh, no,
that's
no,
not
no, no,
everything.
no. Yeah, there'll be police that are in the parking lot area. We're gonna have a couple of levels of security. There'll be security inside of the,
So once they get on the property,
Bennington Sheriff's Department will be primarily responsible for patrolling those parking lots right outside the venue itself. We're working closely with them. And if I could also mention, Jerry, that we're working closely with Crystal Odell from the Pownal EMS, and one suggestion she had when we were going through this plan was having a helicopter pad outside the gates. I think you know the ball field in the north end of the property. And for Pownal EMS, that was an important point for them to have that emergency service area. So we blocked that off so we can accommodate that request from Pownal EMS.
I have a couple other questions, and I'm not trying to,
No, no.
it's gonna sound like
no,
I think this is exciting, but I wanna talk about stuff. The, what's that train? Have you run a lot of these other events in other places, like many?
If I could just speak, I have.
these three guys have, so I'll let them talk about that.
I have one coming up just next month. It's a 10,000 person event, headlined by Earth, Wind and Fire, the Doobie Brothers, and a number of other bands. This is my 5th year of doing these 10,000 person events in another location, and that's what drew me to
to this one, because I see the same opportunity here. So I've been through this, and that started from nothing to 5 years later, we sell out in 5 hours. So I have the experience in terms of a large-scale event, Jerry, and I think Jerry Bacall also can speak to that.
I've been a concert promoter for almost 25 years. I'm based in New Jersey. My company has worked in 10 different states. We've done shows from small room as 100 to 60,000 seat stadiums. People I work with, most of the Northeast shows for Bruce Springsteen I've been doing for the last 20 years. My company's produced over 10,000 concerts in festivals, stadiums, arenas, outdoor events. Too many to name, but been doing it for 25 years.
And you guys are taking great precaution to have security and EMS and all that stuff. I just want to be clear that the expectation isn't that no one will be hurt or injured or, have any kind of episode, because we've had in your
Nobody
experience-
wants anybody to get hurt,
No,
so
no.
we take
But
major precautions.
In your
to try
experience,
and-
you've had, that happens.
Oh, yes.
So I just want people to know that we're not sitting here saying, we don't think anything's gonna happen.
It's taking every precaution possible and working closely with Vermont State Police as far as Route 7 is concerned, the Bennington Sheriff's Department inside the property, those parking lots. Making sure we're coordinating with the Williamstown Police Chief because traffic will come through Williamstown, and also the Bennington Police Chief. There's so many, this is a coordinated team effort, Jerry. And I think we've made the right inroads to coordinate with all the necessary individuals.
The other thing is this event is skewed towards an older crowd, so we're
That's
not
my next
anticipating mosh pits or issues with that or
Their
really
mosh pits is gonna be one shot.
Again, I don't know you guys,
We can go.
but the one title was Full Tilt Boogie.
Right.
And the older, you say that it's gonna be geared for older, and also what, like would be G rated or?
Very G-rated.
Okay.
Extremely G-rated.
You'll be able to go,
old.
Jerry.
The other thing is, we take great precautions with alcohol. When people come to shows, they drink. We want to work with that situation very closely because that's where we can run into issues is with alcohol. People inebriated driving, we want to control that. That's the most important thing is to control that.
Is there a following, again, I just Googled the
Yep.
Full Tilt Buggy.
Right.
I didn't know anything about that, but is there a following of that? Like that was related to a documentary? Is that?
It's
is
a
that part of
name
it?
my partner uses for events that we do sometimes in New Jersey,
Mhm.
and we thought we'd bring it up here and
And you have people that,
Yeah,
they know what, I didn't know what it meant.
right. It's skewed older.
Okay.
We have a website that'll go live
Yeah.
once we've gotten
Okay.
approval to.
And if I could just make one other point, Frank, we are working very closely with Vermont DLC, Jason Elmer, and we've met with Jason a number of times. Vermont law, I gather, you can, bring 2 cups of beer, that's what you can be served. And the suggestion from Jason was, let's serve 1 cup of beer, as opposed to 2. And so we want to follow Vermont DLC's guidance and direction, because we want this a safe event for all.
And you wanna do this again?
We want to do it as many times as we can.
They have to
Many
get
times
good
as it
marks.
works.
They gotta get good grades
Particularly the first
on
time.
this one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Every time. The fence, you started to describe the fence, Steve. Describe it a little more thoroughly. I'd like to know whether it's unmovable sections and how is it held up? Does it have feet on the bottom? Are they linked together? Kids aren't gonna be able to push it over
No,
and
you
fall
see a
into
lot
the
of
pond.
the construction zones that you see, especially, on new development in new cities, and National Fence is a big fencing company. They're usually 8x8 panels or 6x8 panels that'll have a foot, have feet that will go into the bottom of the fence post. I usually put 75-pound sandbags on each intersection.
And they are
So it
linked
takes-
They are
together.
linked.
And they are linked together, yes, correct.
I think it would be, I think it will be, I will move to make it a condition of granting the conditional use permit that you do submit to us the safety plan, that you submit to the state police and any other authorities having jurisdiction, so that we have as part of the record what it is that you've agreed to do.
Okay, let me get a second for that.
Well, I haven't made the motion. I thought we were gonna do that, no, I thought we were gonna do that in a deliberative session. I just wanted to tell them what I'm gonna do.
Oh. In that case, I'll just sit here. Go ahead.
I'd like to have you suggest in your website or advertising that people carpool.
We will.
I think you are optimistic to think you're gonna get 4 people per car.
You were thinking 3.
Well, that's what your traffic consultant said, but you said in your presentation, in your materials 4.
Right.
And I think that's.
3 is a very average number.
Yeah.
That's what
But
we
you
always
suggest
have.
carpooling in your literature.
We have that in the website, so that already.
The alcohol is obviously a concern. I'm glad it's a concern for you. By the way, sir, Jerry, what's your company's name?
It's Concerts East.
Concerts East?
Right.
Okay. And I think how you manage the alcohol is obviously your problem. I'd like to know what you are going to be carrying for insurance. Is there going to be some kind of alcohol insurance in the jurisdiction where I practice? You can't serve alcohol without having insurance.
Yeah. We're going to have,
DOC will require.
yeah, we're going to meet the requirements of the state. But there are other requirements.
Can you
that
tell us
we
what
meet.
they are?
Right now, we're going through the negotiation for purchasing the insurance, so I don't know the answer to that right now, but it's probably going to be 5 million per occurrence or
Can
something
you
like that.
submit that to us?
We will
once you-
provide you a copy of the binder
Okay.
as one of the conditions of the approval.
How tall are the light towers going to be?
No more than 25 feet.
And you did describe that they are going to be downward directed, shielded, and
In the
we haven't seen that plan. I'm going to suggest that that board be entered into evidence,
Sure.
and your photometrics plan should be
Sure.
submitted in
So
evidence too.
in your plan, there's a copy of the solar light towers. This is the suggested tower that we would use. And attached to that suggestion in the back is a photometric plan for each of those towers, which talks to what the number of lumens are.
Oh, I got the staging, but I didn't get
You
that.
didn't get that in the back?
I don't think it was in
You
the
didn't
original
get it.
packet, it was in the
Okay,
final
I will
packet.
make sure that you get a
Well,
copy of
just,
the
I
light towers.
would like it in evidence as part of the
So why don't I
hearing.
do that? I'll give it to you now as part of the evidence. You have it in yours?
What's right in front of it? It's right before the Medi Perry's letter on the soils. Right before the HB.
Like
this far
packet
back.
that you guys were given from them guys are the ones with the green paper clip, the black paper clip.
Okay.
Oh.
There's a little difference between the two.
Now we
Okay. But hopefully that
raise
addresses
your
There you
paperclip. Okay.
It's Earth Day, right?
Yeah, it's happy Earth Day.
Yeah, it is Earth Day.
You're welcome.
That's where all the green came from.
So that.
What are you gonna do to control or to assure that people don't end up hanging out in the parking lot and drinking what they brought with them and listening free?
One of the things that we have on our website is the do's and don'ts, and on the site it says that there's no drinking in the parking lot, don't bring your own stuff. If we catch you drinking in the parking lot, you're gonna get ejected. So that will also be patrolled by the Bennington County Sheriff's Department, and we'll have our own parking people out there as well, advising them when they come in. This isn't a free-for-all, you can't tailgate, you gotta go home. So that's one of the measures that we're putting in place.
Okay, that certainly is a good procedure.
Can I just
Sure.
piggyback on
Sure.
this for just a minute? I was chair of the board, select board, when Lollapalooza came to town. And one of the issues was who's going to be in charge of patrolling the town of Pownal? Now, you've taken care of your site down there, but I'm talking about all the little back roads, et cetera, that are here in Pownal, that when people get released from this event, is there going to be, the sheriff's department going to be responsible for that? State police? Do you have any idea how that would work?
Yeah, I really couldn't address that because I don't know what the sheriff's office or what the state police would do, but I
Who does that
suspect.
now? That's one of the questions.
We have
Do you
a
contract with the-
part-time constable.
You have a but do you contract with the sheriff's department?
No, we don't any longer.
Okay.
Do you
So I
not-
guess he won't be doing it either.
No, I guess,
If you're looking for a job.
You don't contract with the sheriff's
Not
department?
yet, we haven't.
So, okay, so excellent question, because that should be incorporated in the discussions with the sheriff's department and
We
the state.
absolutely, I've made a note,
Yeah.
Frank, that,
Yeah, okay.
about the town of Pownal, who's patrolling that
Right.
outside of the event.
Thank
And
you.
I'll follow up on that,
I appreciate it.
absolutely.
Do you have people from past venues that could use as a reference, saying, we had these guys in,
Sure.
that might help? And then, have you ever been asked to, again, I'm not familiar with how this stuff works, but you use a venue, then you leave to ensure that it's cleaned up. Ever been asked to?
good question.
It's bonding,
Have you ever
required to
had
have bonding
to,
insurance.
is that part of?
We have comprehensive insurance that deals with all of that. Stephen, this is private property, so he would be responsible for cleaning up his property. Outside of the property, that would be another question, who's responsible, but we usually become responsible for that. Within a certain amount of area, we're responsible for cleaning up, or, you know.
So you have a contract with him to
See, we're-
leave it the way you,
Yeah, the bottom line is that we've got a program in place that we're gonna have people cleaning the property as things happen. We've contracted with TAM to be the sort of waste hauler, if you will. And then we're gonna have a group of people go through and clean the property as they break it down. And we'll probably go out on the roads as well and make sure anything that people throw out of their car, because people, if you give them the opportunity to do stupid things, they will. But we'll go up and down the road and make sure that that gets cleaned as well.
Okay, that's good.
But we do have that mechanism in place, but we wanna make sure the property can get used again, it's our property, and so we're not gonna leave it a mess.
A lot of times fencing keeps trash in, so it's going, we've done a lot of events with this fencing, doing an area and the trash is on the ground, and that butts up, if there's wind, it takes it right into the fence. So we don't really break down the fencing until the place is cleaned up.
what's your biggest concern about holding these kind of events?
To me,
Yeah, well, just,
depending on it really depends on what kind of crowd you're anticipating. A Lollapalooza crowd is a lot scarier than what we're doing. So, you know, it's really what type of, you know, the genre of music you're doing and who you're expecting. Adults, we tend to, you know, try and treat it as, you know, this is gonna be a little bit lax, and we'll hire, you know, lower the age group, and according to who the bands are, you get concerned about what the kids are gonna do. We don't like doing those events,
Yeah.
so we tend to try and keep them controlled. I've been doing an event for the last 17, 18 years, it's called a Warp Tour. And it's basically a traveling, floating city of music that comes in, and we've been doing actually at a racetrack, we did it for, an English Town race we did for 4 or 5 years, and I brought it to Monmouth Park Racetrack, and we did it at the racetrack there, and there's 20,000 kids, and, you know, it just comes off, and it goes, and it really flows, and it does well. Obviously, you have a lot of emergency and EMS, and it's hot, and kids get overheated, and there's a lot of trips back and forth with the EMS to the hospital. That's kid stuff. But there's a lot of precautions put into place. We wanna put more precautions in for an older crowd as for the alcohol. We don't really worry about, these are gonna be people sitting on blankets and chairs and watching the music, and we're worried about them getting.
Highly skeptical. I can't imagine you can get 12,000 people in there. You say it's gonna look empty. I think it's gonna be like this.
Big property.
It's a big piece of property.
You're gonna be able to get cars parked on the east side of that pond? That's what your final plunge?
Yeah, actually, the parking plan is measured, and normally what you do with the parking plan is you make the parking spots a lot smaller. You try to really put them in cheek to jowl.
How big are these?
These are pretty big, these are 25 by 10. I
Should
mean, these are
be
very big parking spots.
9 by
because
20.
we want to make sure there's more than adequate space, that people can park. There are other plans, like the Lollapalooza plan, had 12,500 spots, we've got 5,065. So that should put it in perspective. And that plan, that parking plan, you approved. So,
Not
well, a previous board had approved. We want to make sure there's more than enough room. You know, we think based upon the mix of the music, we'll probably get that number of people. I tell them one of the bands are
Sure,
I have a
we
question.
want to deal with the conditional use.
Have you had any
I'm gonna
conversation
finish
with
the
the
conditional use.
abutting towns
What I
in
wanna
New
do is I
York
wanna wrap this
insofar
up
as the
and
impact
on
this
fact
is gonna
it's
have
met.
on their
This part
roads,
is met.
like, at the end of the day?
We really haven't because of the distance that you'd have to travel. That's not something that we thought we would have an issue with because of distance. The traffic engineers that we hired, they indicated that it's really Vermont and Massachusetts. And they've already had discussions with Mass DOT and with the Massachusetts State Police.
Okay,
They didn't feel that the impact would be going into New
that it
York
would
State.
filter out by the time it got to Route 2 or
Right,
to,
because you'd have, there's an absorption level, there's a level of service that roads can absorb,
okay.
and it should be able to absorb that level of service. I think one of the things that will hopefully help you, in your mind, figure out what the age of the people that are gonna come. One of the bands that's gonna play, that performer, is Buddy Guy. And he's not gonna bring 22-year-old kids. So, I mean, when you're thinking about people that are,
young.
well, it's funny because you tell some people who's playing and they say, who's that? And then you kind of now can figure out how old they are. But when you're thinking about musicians of that genre, you're really looking at a much older crowd that wants to see somebody like him. It's sort of like going to see B.B. King. You know, unless you really know who he is as a 22-year-old, you're probably not gonna go see him play.
I'd like to move on here if I could. And we're at the point now where we need to be discussing the submittal requirements, 4.2.2.4 on page 19, and there's, you submitted your application and plot plan, that is complete.
I don't think we've seen the letter from the park owner yet, though.
Someplace I have, yeah.
Right here, currently owned by Green Mountain Racetrack LLC.
And that was
Business
signed
been
by
granted.
Richard Hine. Did Richard sign
Well,
it?
actually, Green Mountain Racetrack LLC was created before the last DRB meeting, and I'm the manager of
And
Green
you're in.
Mountain.
Oh, you're in, okay.
And you own the park. So you
Mountain Racetrack LLC.
can join in, you can join in the application as owner.
That's correct.
Thank you for doing so.
All right. Application is complete. Does anybody have any questions on that? Second part of this is written material as requested. There's a whole litany of stuff here that talks about building square footage, et cetera, But the issue that is probably most important that we're going to have to discuss and get your input on as far as, I mean, I think most of those questions have been answered with the material that you have given us, unless you have something more that you need to add. We talked about lighting. Anything, is there anything else you want to add about lighting?
No, I think we've covered
I think
that.
we've covered lighting. Is the board,
Do you want a motion on the completeness of the application?
if you wish to do it now, we can.
Sorry,
Oh, I just
put
had,
your hand up.
I was starting to, has there been any conversation with the railroad?
Actually, Club Harbor has talked to the railroad, and in their report it states that the railroad has limited service on the weekends.
Okay,
And that we're gonna coordinate activities with the railroad. They don't have very long trains that travel on Saturdays.
perfect, thank you.
Interesting.
That's in the Club Harbor letter.
Okay.
That's
Which
attached.
is CHA.
Yep, CHA. that's right.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion that the application is,
I'll move that the application insofar as the conditional use permit is complete, but that the board may, either later in this meeting or during deliberative session, impose conditions on the grant of the conditional use permit.
Second?
any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Okay, we have, as we said, additional written material. A lot of this has been answered. Hours of operation, I think you've talked about that. Method of operation, I think you've talked about that.
The hours, they're asking for extended hours?
We're asking for an extension to 11:30. Right now, under the zoning as we've read it, we can operate till 10.
And there's just no way around that.
For an event like this, you probably want to go to 11:30.
And that's,
Well,
that's the actual playing. In other words,
right.
how's it read, Frank? Is
In the zoning regs?
it?
or-
Yeah.
Says hours of operation.
What's that mean?
I don't
In this
think the
case, it just
bylaw-
means,
I
it
don't
just
think-
means they've addressed it.
I don't think the bylaw per se fixes hours of operation. It's up to us to fix the hours of operation. The bylaw fixes time periods, times during the day when you can have noise at certain decibel levels. But I don't think there's anything in the bylaw that says that they have to stop at 10 o'clock.
That's what I'm asking. So they're not asking for us to, anything,
They're asking
Beyond what-
only in connection with the noise.
Right.
time is, okay.
That's it. Other than that, okay, method of operation, you've discussed that. Characteristics having impact on adjacent properties. We've talked about, I'm gonna skip over that, because that's kind of, that's the noise issue when we get to it, but you've taken care of and addressed the wastewater, you've addressed the water.
Yes.
You've addressed the trash. You've addressed the soils, I think, even.
We've attached a letter from DHB which gets into
Stormwater.
not only drainage, the grading plan, stormwater runoff, water quality, soils,
Soil borings,
um,
sand.
everything. And in your packet that I gave to you are attachments that include color pictures that were designed by BHB of all those issues that you need to concern yourself with.
All right, we've talked, and you will give us a statement, J, which is how the required findings for approval of a conditional use permit can be met by this proposal, and you will have that in there. Okay. Is there anything on C, anything else you want to add to C? I don't see anything here particularly that pertains to much. I do want to say one thing, and we haven't done it yet, I don't want to miss it. And that is, we talked about the portable stage, and we've talked about the fact that it meets all the setback requirements, and it also meets the height requirements. Now, the issue is that unless the board has an issue with those particular requirements, I'm going to ask for a motion that they be met.
Can we make a finding that they've been met?
Yes.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about, and you've talked about your Portage Johns and police, everything else you've talked about on this list. Let's talk about the two issues then that are most crucial at the moment that you are looking for as far as, or one that you really want to have the variance for, and the other we're going to have to determine what hours of operation we put on this particular project. I think you've talked about hours of operation. Is there anything else you need to add about that? We will take it under consideration when we do deliberative session. But is there anything else you need to add to that particular issue?
You're asking for it to go beyond 10 o'clock, so based on your experience with events and based on who the bands are, there's a reason that you want it to have that leeway till 11:30.
Right.
So I think if you can.
We're
let the
looking
board
for
know.
what we need to
Right.
do.
Council can address the issue.
Is
To
it-
make the issue, yeah.
I'm asking them as to why, based on the bands that you're having and the flow of the music and this type of event, 11:30 is not a late night. And it just seems that's more of the norm in this kind of event, but.
For the actual event itself,
Yeah.
correct, for the event part of it. That's
Even
it.
for a concert, which we do theater concerts or small arena concerts, you know, it's an 8 o'clock showtime, there's a support act, you know, most of it's down by 11 to 11:30. It's more of a kind of a standard time
That's
for shows to end.
It's a standard.
Whether it's an outdoor event or some events will end before dark sometimes, but an event like this with multiple acts,
Tanglewood ends,
Saturday night.
Tanglewood ends at 10.
Tanglewood it with a.
Well, it's,
Yeah, next Tanglewood.
Well, when the VSO comes here, they'll probably end it.
Okay,
I mean,
very good. All right, let's talk about the noise issue. And that's the issue that you're going to want a variance on.
yes.
Talk to me about noise.
Bobby?
Oh, what is the initial question about the noise? So let's,
Why you're
Well,
asking
we have
for
a
it.
standard in our bylaws,
right,
and you obviously are going to exceed that standard for this event.
has potentials of, not saying we're going to. So, I mean, audio does travel by wind. A wind blows, you can hear something further away because of the wind and the way that audio can travel. That, you know, so at one point, we could be 80 dB at the perimeter of the site, where other points it could be much less than 80 dB, depending on the density of the air at the point of that time of day, the wind factor, and, you know, what band is playing in what direction. Now, the average level of a concert at a mixed position, that front of house position that we were talking about, usually sits at about 105 dB. So if we're at 105, and that's a loud show, that's a loud rock show, where I don't think Buddy Guy is gonna be playing at 105 dB out at the front of house mixed position. So by the time that position escalates to where the outer perimeter of the site actually is, we're probably talking on an average of another 2,000-3,000 feet, if not more than that. So the audio will dissipate during that time. But now audio can bounce. It can bounce off the water. It could bounce off the glass of the buildings and actually start diffracting in a couple different directions. So you may be 50 feet down from the property line in one area where it could be 60 dB. But if you were closer to where the water was and it's bouncing off the water, it could potentially be 80 dB. So there will be some differentials on the property lines on exactly what the audio levels will end up being.
And the purpose was to be conservative, because it's, you know, they want to make sure that within the entire evening, they're within the confines of what they've represented. And we talked about this, and the anticipation is it's probably less than 96 decibels.
Is there a way for you
Yeah.
to record that level of sound at that perimeter, so the next time you come, hopefully,
We can
you'll
take
have that
measurements during-
information
we can take
and have a
measurements
better
during the course
understanding of
the-
what kind of
During the
degree
show.
it's going to
Like
be
you
at.
actually mentioned earlier about, you know, team football games and stuff like that. What is the crowd noise there throughout the perimeter of there too? We can take those measurements during the course of the day and in the evening and
And that would be very
Right.
helpful.
for it to
Exactly,
proceed forward
and-
thereafter, right, agreed.
And if in fact you do that, maybe you could submit something to us at a later date when you've got that information, and we can put it in our file and have reference to that
Absolutely.
for future.
Because when you, I'm sure you may need it for the next time.
There's also a lot of artists aware that there are noise constraints, and they will acquiesce to the dB level that you need to be at certain times, but usually it doesn't become a real issue unless you have really loud bands.
From actually taking measurements during the show, we could adjust within the show
Exactly.
itself.
And given that space down there, there's.
Right. Like some individual amphitheaters like PNC Art Center, you can't be over 98 dB at that front of house mix position. They control that whole space, so it's a controlled zone, but obviously it's over events and measurements and,
Right, this
you
is
know,
an
there's a
unknown.
very close
Really, yeah.
proximity of homes outside of the space too.
I think the issue probably, and I'm just talking out loud, is that there will be sound after a certain time, you know, not, I don't know if the decibel level is that critical, but like the Dollar General stays open till 9 and everything else is shut down at 8, 7, you know, it's a small town, so that's gonna be more of the issue, they're gonna hear, doesn't matter what level it is, they're gonna.
Right, because the ambient noise isn't there, the ambient noise has changed.
Right,
Well,
there's
no,
no
it's just-
background noise, right?
it's a
Right,
small
there's no
town.
background, right, it's quiet,
Does it
quiet
make any-
and dark, right.
Make any sense to require that the amplifiers be directed, as the stages are directed to the north, rather than, for example, to the west?
Well,
There are neighbors closer to the west than there are to the north.
Now, which way, I need.
North.
The stage is
Which way
presently
is the stage
facing
adjusting
north.
to right now?
West, yeah.
Like, you know,
Stage is facing north now.
Yeah, the stages are facing north.
So,
Maybe they want to go. So this is north here.
Buddy guy.
right, so, and here we have the highway that we're crossing. And we're, I mean, if that's 400 feet, we're probably 3,000 feet till we're on the roadway. By the time we're 3,000 feet out there, I'd
Well, that's, I mean,
get very surprised we're at 70 dB out there.
would a condition that the stages and the amplifiers face north be objectionable?
Well, if you do that, what will happen is you're actually facing it towards the trailer park.
Yes.
What we're trying to do is not impact the trailer park, so if you look at where the stage is, if you go in this direction, you're not really impacting people until you get to about 2 miles
And
away.
then you also start getting that brush line back there, or the trees in the woods, and that's gonna start dampening the look.
Yeah, right here. We purposely didn't put the stages this way.
Flip up so I can see the north arrow again, because I think.
That's the north arrow right there.
goes east.
All right, so it would be northwest.
Right.
That's easy. We can just
And
change it.
if we change the stages this way, you're gonna get bounced off the building, and we didn't wanna do that. So by putting the stages where we put them, this has the least impact on any neighbors that were out there.
Northwest.
Originally, if you recall, we had stages here, we had a stage there, and we changed them because we didn't want to have that sound bounce into neighborhoods that would affect people. We also didn't want to bounce it off of the hill, because then it would bounce back.
I'd like to hear council address the section 4.2.42 requirements.
A through D. And E.
These are your specific conditions for conditional use? Or-
No, this is on page 22, 4.2.4.2.
You're asking for a
Actually, I
variance,
don't-
and these are the, these
I
are
don't have
the,
that one.
these are the issues that you're going to
Oh,
have
for the
to-
variance, yep,
You're going
okay.
to have to address, and you need to be able to, you need to answer. So
So,
that when we go into executive, or go into deliberative session, we can make a decision.
so, and that's an interesting question, because variances are generally applicable when you're talking about the physical makeup. And so what you have here is, you have a decibel level, and they're asking for a waiver of that, or an adjustment of that.
But where do you find waiver in that bylaw?
Well,
We
I
had- we
use
had
it,
this-
right, did you have that discussion?
We had this
Right,
discussion last
Because we don't
time.
have a, right, so you would, it's based on the usage, that it's appropriate that that level be available for this type of use. Now, if we want to interpret, because we're not building something, there's not a river gorge in the middle of the property, which is something that you're used to when you're talking about physical variances. So we're applying this to the use, and this is what the town has, I'm looking for the 60 and the 70 and 8.8.2.
You're talking about the performance standard?
Yeah, in the performance standard. And I believe that the DRB, and I'm going to try to find that for you, that the DRB has some flexibility regarding your standards. I can't give you a variance on for physical variance because there is no structure being constructed.
I'm not going to suggest that there is a permanent structure there, but
Right.
these movable sound stages have some of the attributes of structures in that they are physical, they have a roof, they have supports holding them up. And I just think that if you could tie together, it's saying we need it because we need it to have a concert.
Right.
Is
No,
circular.
What I will say is that the gentlemen who are involved in these particular projects do this kind of work, and they know what the project requires. So in part, we need it because we need it, but we can't make it happen outside of what those dimensions are. They saw what the decibel level was. The request was to be conservative. The belief is that it will dissipate as it based on the direction, it will dissipate by the property line. The intent, based on the bands, is not to, scream it out. But they sure as heck don't want to be in violation of the zoning ordinance. And it also gives you a profile of things to come, perhaps. So I can say, because you need to find in the variance those
We have to
standards.
find these components.
Right, the components that they can't do it otherwise. Well, based on the mix of music, based on the bands, based on the topography of the property, based on the location of the water, all of those elements informed Bobby, we better ask for an increase in the decibel level. They can't change the location of the water, they can't change, they set up the site to avoid noise going toward the more populated areas. And this was the result.
Can I use an
Yeah.
example? That's Warped Tour that I talked about before. We did in a parking lot of a racetrack. During racetrack hours, the racetrack was operational and they were racing. And the people, and there's a big town around, the town of Oceanport, when there were houses right across the street. And these are the same issues that came up. And we wound up dealing with the area and pointing the stages where we needed to point them. What happened was the whole show was inaudible while he was sitting in the racetrack. Nobody could hear it. The horsemen were concerned that the horses would get scared. Or, you know, the people were upset that there was gonna be noise during racing and none of that happened. It was basically inaudible and it wasn't that far away. And there was no complaints from the town. It was basically how we positioned the stages. And this was really loud music. This was kids' music. There's loud bands and how many stages were at the Warped Tour?
6 or 8, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but what you're saying, and I think we've tried to make the point, that you're doing everything possible to
Right.
minimize the noise
We
that
can't
will.
know until we
but-
actually know.
Well,
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
next thing I want to talk about, which is that you had suggested in one of your letters, and I thought it was a good idea, that you get a variance for the day before so that you could come and maybe test this and see what,
Yeah, we want to have sound
Some
checks.
measurements.
so that we
yeah,
can actually
and,
look at
and
movements.
that will give you some guidance. It'll also
Right.
give you
Absolutely-
some
absolutely will.
help
Right.
in
Right.
monitoring what goes on the day of the performance and
Yes.
doing your utmost to make sure it doesn't get
Right.
too loud.
I think they're fully intentional to blow out the sound system on
On the day
Friday.
before,
Yeah, well,
whenever you make noise.
that's
and
why
make
you
sure it's
asked for the
private.
second day of variance.
That's
To
correct.
make the maximum
But are you
impression
suggesting
that day.
that
And we'd
you
also see the
wouldn't
hot spots
award
and
the
be able to-
variance now,
Right.
you would wait, because that would
Oh, no,
worry
no,
me.
no, no, no.
Okay.
This is a one-time event, so
Right.
we can do some things
Yes.
that we might not do
Right,
long-term.
right, right, right.
Hmm.
Okay.
But
Did
we'll
I,
put-
did
I
that
know,
supply
I think that
some-
was, I think you did very well. I'd just like to have you send us a letter with that rationale
I'm
that
happy
I
to-
can put in
I'm
the
happy to
file.
do that.
And,
Okay.
and they have the
Four
capability
point
of
two,
of checking that.
point 4.2, yes.
We'll put sound monitors at the perimeter of the property, so we'll be able to monitor what happens over the course of the day.
Oh, it's a roving vehicle, yeah. And everybody who has an iPhone, you could download the app. Because there are dB meters in iPhone, every, you know, it's decibel meters, frequency response, there's a whole different.
iPhones are already causing too much trouble.
Yes, I know. The guy who invented the computer, I think, started it all.
Okay, is there any other comments on this issue from the board?
I just have a general question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. One of your strong selling points of this is providing local employment.
Yes.
And you have said up to 300 seasonal jobs. Comfortable with that?
Might be more than that, actually. It depends upon how many events we have. So to put that in perspective, and it's one of the things I wanted to point out tonight, we've actually been in discussion with the Vermont Symphony about coming to the site and playing next year. We're looking at a series of events similar to this, but also symphonies and circuses and other types of events where we'll be able to provide those seasonal jobs for people. And if it goes the way we think it'll go, it could be more than 300
And
seasonal
what
jobs.
kind of jobs are we talking about?
It can range everything from people that are gonna serve beer to food to parking cars, and they're not high-tech jobs, although some people may end up getting picked up doing some sound and work that's on the site, or doing some production work that's on the site.
Minimum wage, you think, or a little better?
It's probably gonna be a little better than minimum wage.
A lot of, it is different, security people,
Yep.
stagehands.
Are
There's
you
a lot of people.
bringing up a parking company from New Jersey to manage the parking on site?
Yes, Scott has a parking company that he wants to use, that he's used before in the past.
Okay.
Very, right, very just a great, responsible company that knows what they're doing, so.
And their letter is also in the packet.
I saw, that's where I got the idea.
I feel very comfortable with them knowing exactly what to do, and I've only seen them act in the most professional manner in parking cars.
One of the things we hope to do is post, once we've gotten all the approvals in place, the opportunities for people to work for us.
Hiring now, or now hiring. Send your resume.
Okay, anything else on the board on this particular issue? If not, we're going to move along. I think that takes care of pretty much all the, that particular section. Parking, we've discussed parking. I think parking has been thoroughly vetted unless somebody on the board has an issue more with parking. And I'm going to move along then. I have one more issue, and that is, we haven't talked about signage. Now, we have a sign ordinance that says you can have a 10 square foot sign without a permit. Is that gonna work for you? Are you putting up signs? I mean, how are you, what are you doing here as far as signs are concerned?
Signs for what element of it?
Well, I don't know,
Day of the
parking,
Event signs,
advertising,
parking
event
signs.
signs.
The sign holder, I mean, that's, we plan to use.
We have a sign post that's at the property right now, that won't exceed your
Okay,
requirements, so we'll probably post a sign there.
all right.
The way things work nowadays, people don't advertise in the paper and they really don't read signs, it's all viral, so.
Well, you can see how old I am then, can't you? Okay, that's fine, it's an issue that needs to be discussed, because
Right.
I hate to have you go down there and put a 50 by 50 foot sign up down there and say,
Right.
well, nobody said anything about
No,
signs.
we've already been told what the rules are, there'll be no billboards, and any sign that we put up will be within the guidelines for the
Thank you.
zoning.
And more directional signs, also when people get into the venue, there'll be signs for where the box office is, where all,
That's okay.
everything is gonna be delineated.
And we're talking about outside.
It-
All right, board have any other issues before I wrap this up?
Mr. Lamb, I just have a quick question. so
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
not- Well, two quick questions, actually. I want to just get back to the sign for a moment, because I didn't talk to Steve about that. But the sign, so it's just an understanding what Pownal requires, so they have an existing sign
Frame.
frame. Is there a text permit, so that when they put something in, so that we know that it meets whatever the regs are, but what about the text? Will that require a separate application?
I don't believe
I
that.
don't believe so.
When we
We
don't
see- we
regulate
see-
free speech.
We see signs go up
Have you ever had an
there,
issue with that?
Right,
bingo,
okay.
car fest.
So the answer is
Right,
no.
okay, so I just wanted to make sure. And then the temporary directional signs, this direction, this way,
That's fine.
right, okay. So then the other question was when Mr. Smithers actually mentioned, well, we may, if things go well and the permit looks good, we may impose some conditions, and he mentioned, one or two items. Anything that anyone can think of, understanding you have to approve the permit, but it sure is helpful while everyone's here to ask those questions as you have been, so that there's not a surprise that they can't meet. And so far you've raised those conditions and there hasn't been any problem, so I just wanted to vet those or get those out.
Thank you. I'm at the point here where I will open this up to you folks who have been sitting there very patiently, quietly. Is there anybody who has been sworn in who wishes to make a statement, testimony? Yes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Peter Odierna. I am the Executive Director of the Bennington County Industrial Corporation. For the record, I have been sworn in.
Thank you.
You all should have received a copy of a letter that I provided regarding this opportunity at the track, and I won't go through it verbatim, but at BCIC, we think that this is a good opportunity from an economic development perspective. What we do know is that when we host large-scale, Vermont large-scale types of projects in the region, such as Garlic Fest, that does have a significant multiplier effect throughout the community, as oftentimes people are looking for places to lodge and eat either before or after the event. So we think that there's a question about direct jobs. We also think that there's an indirect job component to this as well. As Stephen mentioned earlier, one of the objectives is to engage with local vendors and entrepreneurs. And I have, for instance, in my letter, making connections with Northshire Brewery, which is an up-and-coming brewery located in Bennington. And that, for instance, could open up a regional market for them that currently does not exist. And just one other thing, I spent a good part of today, this afternoon, at Bennington College working on some entrepreneurial projects that some of the students are working on. And they are coming up, they are designing something really cool that involves beacon technology. And that's a wireless Bluetooth enabler. I'm not an expert in that field, but nonetheless, they originally thought that this would be a good application for coffee houses. So we started to press them and said, hey, is there bigger markets out there that you might not be thinking of? And they said, yes, there could be some industrial applications to this. And there also could be applications for festivals and gatherings of people and what have you. So I had an opportunity to talk to Bobby before this meeting got going. I said, hey, Bobby, would you be interested in engaging with these kids to see if there's any applications on what they are trying to develop at Bennington College for these proposed activities down at the track? And he was eagerly affirmative to that. So just generally speaking, we think that this could have a very significant economic development impact for southwestern Vermont and the surrounding regions. And as an institution, BCIC does support what is being proposed.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Jim.
It's a larger deal with Lollapalooza, but just to give you the magnitude of the police, we put up 60 box lunches for the state police only. So, and then,
For that event.
that was the Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cops.
Anybody else in the audience? Yes.
Yes, I won't bother standing up. Most people know me. I'm Nelson Brownell. One of the things that I know that Steve and others have said to the select board and so forth, but really is announcing this to the neighbors and the others. Think of Bennington Parade and how long they advertise and so forth. And it well exceeds 70 dBs to most of the houses when it goes down the street. What we really need to do is to make sure that the neighbors of this are notified the exact day and times when this occurs. And I think that would be something that they can do by letter or however, because you will be advertising in the paper, you'll be doing other things. But one of the things I always heard was, like the events with the airplanes, why didn't they tell us? So if you could make that part of your decision, it'd be very helpful. That way I won't get so many calls.
I know it was self-motivated.
Just to add to it, Nelson,
Even
though,
with the test process.
during the fireworks, during our fair and fireworks, people know exactly that it's 9:30 to 10, and I know several of my friends take their dogs and go for a ride for half an hour.
I can't sleep.
No, but that's important that people know what time
I
it's
think
on, what time it is.
and I think that's something we can discuss. Anybody else have a comment? Yes, ma'am.
Can I have a question instead of a comment? Sure. Katie Schmidt, Northwest Hill Road. How long will it take for the cars to leave the parking lot?
I would say 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
Then it may be quicker. It depends on how many people are left at the end of the event. A lot of people will leave at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. If they see the band they want to see, they might leave. So at the end, there might be a lot less cars there than there were in the beginning.
That also produces a bit of noise,
Right.
running car engines. And will you be sourcing food locally?
That's the intention.
Okay, those were my two questions. Thanks.
Anybody else in the audience?
Would you be willing to commit that all cars will be off the property by, say, midnight?
Commit?
Do the best effort.
That would be hard.
I think with the two exits, you're going to.
Especially at 11:30.
I don't
For
think I'd recommend
11:30,
that you commit
and
to
I
that.
think by 12:30, you'd see an empty parking lot.
But the music is gonna stop at
music's at 11:30
11:30.
now.
Somebody had a question
Drinking
over
it.
here? Or a comment?
10:30,
Right.
John Armstrong, and I'm in Pownal. I have a store and I also have a tasting room. There seems to be a noise issue which everyone has heard, the airplanes, with this concert, with other events. And I know there are people on the board who have personal issues with that. Would they be able to vote on this as a board member? Or would they excuse themselves as
They have the right to excuse themselves.
Okay.
But we don't have the right to excuse them.
Okay, all right. When we were talking about hiring people locally, I plan on being involved with this event. And I know personally I will hire for this event alone at least 3 people that I don't currently have on my staff to handle this event. And if I need to hire more, I will. As I get more information as to what's going on, then I will be able to do that. I also have been asked to be a local contact for this event if this does get approved. And if I do that, I'm going to have somebody else handle that contact as well as being a ticket person if this does all work out. This is all preliminary, but somebody's going to have to handle the phone if I do that. I don't know that will be another person, but it will be more hours for the people that I have working for me. And people are already talking about this. I had somebody stop by today who Mr. Solar probably doesn't even know by name, but they said that you dealt with them in another project that you were working with, and I'll talk to you after we get done, that said that he did everything in his power to make this happen. The town was for it, the local people were for it. It was a much bigger project than this, and I don't know Mr. Solar any better than anybody else in this room, except that I've met him 3 or 4 times, and they have totally given it their approval, only in the sense that he was above board on everything that he did, and the state ended up shutting it down, and I didn't get to the point, I didn't want to hear why, I don't care why, but the town that he was working with were happy with the way he presented things, and this was a multi-month, if not a couple-year project from what I understand. I didn't get the chance to go into details. I told them that I didn't know Mr. Solar any better than anybody else in this town, but that they stopped by specifically this afternoon on their way through to tell me that. So I am not I'm not vouching for the man. I'm just saying with what I have on my plate right now, this would be a good event if all the conditions are met.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I ask you a
Sure.
question? Could you tell us what business you're in?
I have the Hillside House Furniture Store in Pownal,
Okay.
which is right down the Massachusetts border, across from Stewart's. I think that the traffic with the demographic that they are bringing into town, if they're coming from North Adams, if they're coming from Pittsfield, if they're coming from within 50 miles of town, there is a chance that they are going to either stay or stop into my store. I also have the Vermont Tasting Room, which is a division of Hoppy Valley Organics, which has the hop farm down the street. With that being a tasting room, there's going to be people both on Friday and Sunday, as well as Saturday when this event takes place. And I think it's going to be traffic in my store, as well as Mr. Winchester, as well as Mr. Tornabene, as well as anybody who has a store in this town would welcome the traffic for that one-day boost. I know with Mass tax-free weekend in Massachusetts, it's one of the biggest days my store has. For knocking off 6%, 6.25 to be exact, in tax in Massachusetts, they flock to Vermont. So if we could get people into town, they're going to spend money, especially with the demographic that we're talking about here. We're talking, let me ask the council, 25 to 50?
Well,
What is your demographic?
I would
It's older
I
than
would
that, I
go
think.
towards 35 to
Right.
60.
60?
Yeah.
I still fit. I'm just, with that demographic, you're not talking about a lot of hoodlum kind of, and I don't want to tag anybody. We're talking about a group that will come in, enjoy themselves, spend money, and leave. So that's my comment.
Okay. I am going to, at this time, ask the board if they need to have a site visit for this particular project.
Not I.
Okay. I hear no burning desire to go down to the track and walk around. I would then ask that a motion for the board to go into deliberative session.
Can we wait for a minute to make sure we've met all these sections? first for my.
All the what?
I wanna make sure all of our sections have been met before we go into it. I don't wanna skip one, just give me a minute. For my minutes.
Frank, I have a question.
Sir?
Earlier, this gentleman offered to announce the bands that they were looking at having play. I think it's an interesting for people to know.
You would like him to do that?
Can you do that?
Can you do that?
Yeah.
Well, ZZ Top, it's Buddy Guy, it's Gary Clark Jr., who's a contemporary blues artist who's very popular right now. Marshall Tucker.
Yeah, remember him?
Yeah.
Them, remember that?
There's some more contemporary acts of, there's a band called Trigger Hippies, Joan Osborne and members of the Black Crows. There's the Wood Brothers, that was Medeski, Martin and Wood, who was actually a jazz artist.
They were at Mass Mocha, weren't they?
I think they might have.
They were,
been, yeah.
I'm sure, what is it called?
The Wood Brothers.
Yeah.
You know.
Blackberry Smoke.
Blackberry Smoke, which is a more also contemporary act in that vein. And then there'll be some, we haven't filled it out yet, but some local artists and then regional artists.
There you go.
So we're looking at about 16 bands.
16.
And the stages will be the same size and we'll try to go one at a time. And then the local stage will have local and regional acts.
Julie, you
Saw
all
the
set?
movie Chef.
No.
Yes.
The
Gotta
guy
make
that
her
played the
happy,
part in
that's
Chef
pretty
when they were in
clear.
Austin.
Distracting.
I
Gary
was
Clark Jr.
listening.
Are you
My
done?
father and son
No,
was
I
in that
was
truck.
listening to him for a minute. Give me one more minute, please.
She wants to go to the show.
I had a question. Are you gonna have any cameras or any recording devices in the parking lot areas or any of those areas to capture something that the sheriffs might not catch? I mean, given
Probably not.
today's
Yeah, I would leave it to.
iPhones, I mean,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
would-
there's just a lot going on, that's why.
I would leave it to who's patrolling the areas
Okay.
to deal with that.
I'm not gonna
Need
have a bunch
security
of drones
cams?
flying overhead.
Pardon?
We're gonna,
You can't, it's too much noise.
Yes.
That may unfold when they talk
They'll
to
be looking
the
down from the
police.
clubhouse, police will. That's what they did during Lollapalooza.
They
They
did.
were stationed
I
alone
just
in the
have one
clubhouse.
question.
And they had walkie-talkies, hit the guy in the blue jacket. I was up there, they were all lined across in
That's
the
old
clubhouse.
technology.
But it's quiet.
That was crazy content.
Julie, what'd you have?
We closed.
Go back to page 75, 8.8.7, explosive flammable materials, no protection.
Way to go,
What are they
Julie.
gonna have?
Explosive,
75.
flammable materials. and-
Just only because it's in the performance standards.
It's in the standards.
I think in my letter, I have that there will be no explosives.
I just wanna make sure.
So I have, application, event does not anticipate dust, fly ash, fumes, gas, odors, smoke, or vapors to be used or created
It's in the
by the use and occupancy. No atmospheric emissions or gaseous or particulate matter will be created by the operation.
I understand it's not kids, but
So you're all set?
no pyrotechnics, no
the
anything.
age needs to change.
Okay, are we done here?
I do have a question. At the admissions gate, are you going to have metal detectors?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
pat downs,
What?
people.
And bag
Checking
bag
purses,
checks,
yeah.
yes.
Bag check.
Rubber bags.
Nobody can bring booze in.
Nope.
The only thing you can bring in is a bottle of water that's capped, maybe a chair and a blanket, that's it. Everything else is gonna be inside the facility.
All right, once again, I will ask for a motion to go into deliberative session.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're going to go into deliberative
May
session.
I suggest one thing? Well, I'm sorry, Frank, I know you want to go home. Let's get,
What I'm saying to you.
council asked if we would suggest what we're thinking about in terms of conditions before we go into executive session.
Okay, you've had a bunch written down.
And I'm prepared to do that.
Do you have something?
I've been writing and highlighting that.
Speaking only for myself, obviously, and I don't know if these would be accepted by my fellow board members, but I would suggest, number one, that this conditional use permit be limited to a single event, that there will be no drinking or tailgating in the parking lot, that they will maintain dark sky lighting protocols, including not to exceed 20-foot tall solar light towers, that they will measure the noise at the property boundaries and submit report of the decibel levels recorded during the concert to the, I think it ought to probably go to the town clerk, but we can, I don't think you care who we want you to send it to. That the fence to be installed is to be integral and connected panel to panel to prevent being pulled apart. That there will be an effort made to notify neighbors well in advance of the event to let them know of the coming of the event and timing of it. That the cars, that all parking be maintained on the property. I know that's a state police condition too, but I think it ought to be one of ours. If you object to a limit of 5,050 cars, which is what your parking plan shows.
That's all we can fit.
Okay, so
We can't
that
fit
we're gonna
anywhere.
limit it to that.
It's 5,065 actually.
Okay, and that the parking will be conducted by a professional parking company.
That's correct. And his letter's in your packet.
That the hours of operation be from 10 a.m. to 11:30 p.m., that the music be 12 to 8 at the small stage and 3 to 11:30 at the two larger stages. That appropriate insurance will be procured and maintained and enforced to cover liquor liability and personal liability and injury. That you will submit the safety plan that you submit to the state police to the DRB. That you will recommend carpooling in your publications and website. And that you'll, I guess we'll leave the exiting of the property unless somebody else cares about that.
The only concern I have is the light towers at 20 feet because of the lumens that they create, because that means I'm gonna have to put more light towers in there. So if we could cap it at 25, because I think that's
That
what
was
they
the
have.
standard in the
That's the
zoning
standard
ordinance.
that they use, and if, otherwise I have no objection to any of the conditions. I don't see any
I
objections.
have a question about the cars, because the 5,065, does that include sheriff's cars and?
No.
You're just
No,
talking
that
about
wouldn't.
guests?
We're talking about patrons.
Patrons,
Attendees.
right, okay.
Handicapped, electric car,
Yep.
We actually designated.
VIP car,
Right.
but not safety personnel.
Designated spots for handicap.
We have designated spots. In the application, it states that we've added 75 spots. The parking consultant recommended 61. Given the age of our attendees, we thought we might need more.
It hurts.
Yeah, man. I guess we can go, Nelson. All right. I'll bring my cane with me.
And I have one last clarification. You asked for a letter from me so that you would have it in your file regarding an analysis of the applicability of meeting the variance.
Meeting the requirements for variance.
Okay. And I've given it verbally, but I will follow
And
up
I'm
with a
gonna do
letter.
the best I can in writing the decision, but I still want them.
I will get you that letter soon. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. We have a motion. Did we vote on the motion?
No, I
You did
interrupted.
Again.
Uh-huh.
No, but I'm ready now.
Julie interrupted.
Okay, all those in favor of going into deliberative session signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, folks, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Did you want a copy of the lumens, the photometric? No, they don't have that. That's this here.
Much better application.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you. Better overall.